So this is going to be a quick tutorial on how to animate an idle animation. We're just going to start with part one, but one of my previous teachers and mentors, Carol Ashley, also has a really great resource on this as well. Highly recommend watching those videos. I will post a link in the description down below. But if you want to get ahead, I highly recommend watching those videos. In the meantime, let's start off with the first part. So the first thing I'm going to do before I start an idle animation, especially for a brand new character, is I just want to take a look at the animation rig. I want to make sure that it works well. Already, I'm seeing that there's less controllers on the chest. I don't like that. So if I'm looking at a rig and I want to articulate it in a particular way, let's say I want a contrapposto pose. Let's go ahead and select this. This is a decent contrapposto. But if I wanted to rotate the body forward, I really don't want an IK to kind of determine that, because look, now I'm squishing the body and it's just more complicated to animate in this way, especially when I start splining. So what I'm going to do is, first and foremost, I want to make sure that I'm not animating the geometry. So to make sure that I don't do that, I'm going to create a brand new layer, again, in the channel box. I've already made a quick tutorial on this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I'm going to create a new layer from assign selected object. And to make sure it's in this layer, I'm going to click the V for view, and I can tell that it is inside this layer. I'm going to rename this layer Geo. Save that. Now that I have this new layer saved, I'm going to click the empty box until it says R for reference, and now I can no longer touch my geometry. So I don't have to worry about that anymore. Next thing I want to do is, again, I don't want this to be an IK, inverse kinematics. I don't want the rig to be manipulated by, oh, this is fun. Sorry. I don't want the rig to be manipulated by this one controller alone. I want to have multiple controllers. So let's just go ahead and look over to the side. So, ooh, what's this? IK minor controls. So if I turn that on, now it's still IK, so if I move this, it should not move anything else other than the hip, which it does. But it's also, it's not something that I want to use either, because I want to avoid this IK. Because then I have to constantly keep shifting back and just manipulating it. That's just too much work. So I don't want this. Let me actually turn this off by going back here. And instead of turning it on, I'm going to keep it off. Now, something that I really love is when animation or technical artists add these little controllers, because it obviously means something. Because I can't move or manipulate it, it has to be something that I can use to change the actual rig. So I'm assuming that because this is pointing to the torso, it dictates the torso. And look, I have an FK and IK blend. So rather than have that on, I'm going to turn it off to 0. And now look, I have full control and articulation over my body. Now, out of curiosity, I'm kind of curious if it's the same with the feet. Let's say, let's just check this. Let's check the foot. So I'm looking at the foot. I don't see an FK-IK switch. So what's the next closest thing to that? Well, let's look at these controllers. They look like they're pointing down at the feet. If I turn those off, boom, I automatically get my FK switched on. So if I were to show you the difference between FK and IK, let's just see how it works. So I'm having to go down the line to manipulate my character, like so. Now if I wanted to do that with the other leg, all I have to simply do is move the foot and it'll move accordingly, like so. And when you do IK, you generally get this neat little cog that will move the knee in whichever direction you point it towards. So something to keep in mind. So now that I have that, that's good. I'm going to turn that back on. I've got my IK back. And now what I'm going to do is the first portion of my idle is simply getting my character in a pose that I like. So this is incredibly stiff. Generally speaking, your characters will come in looking like this. This is an A pose character. Sometimes you will get a character that is an a T pose, but either way, it doesn't matter. We are simply going to manipulate our character. First thing I like to do is I actually like to drop the character's hips a little bit. If you want your character to be in a more dynamic pose, you're more than welcome to move your feet like so, and kind of twist them in a way. Like anything else, I highly recommend, actually you have to for this assignment, use reference. And we'll go into detail about some other references that we can use. But I'm currently just kind of messing around with this character. So if I were to create a really dynamic idle, maybe this is something that I would want to do. So kind of moving the character forward like so. Kind of noodling around like that. Personally, I don't like this pose. I'm going to keep it simple for myself. So I'm going to just Control Z all the way back here. And I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to drop the hips a little bit. I'm going to move these feet out for a little bit more of a dynamic pose. So I'm going to look at the, actually no, before I do that, let me mess around with the hips a little bit. So if I'm rotating the hips this way, I'm going to make it a little bit more dynamic by selecting these controls. And then twisting them ever so slightly in the opposite direction. Going up the line, and by doing it this way, I'm making a more subtle, more dynamic pose. So this already feels a little stiff still, so I'm going to move this foot out a little bit more. Another thing to keep in mind, everyone. So I don't know if you can see this, but my foot controller is not in the same direction as my cog right here. So or I forget what it's called, but the arrows. It's not the same direction as the arrows. It's not pointing the same direction. So if I want to fix that, all I have to do is go to this move tilt box right here. And if you haven't known already, sorry if I didn't tell you earlier, but if you scroll down the tools, it'll tell you exactly what each tool does, and it'll tell you the exact key for that tool. So if I click on the E key, I now have my rotation on. If I go up here, this is the select tool. If I press Q, I can then select objects. And then obviously, if I want to move anything, I'm going to press the W key. So I'm pressing the W key, and look, my arrows are not pointing in the same direction. That's super easy. All you have to do is double click the move tool, and instead of world, you're going to select object, and boom. It automatically switches from world to object. But keep in mind that it also does that for every cog as well. So every controller. So if I want to, I can, and I always do this, by the way, I constantly switching. So if anyone has a question about whether or not I use object or world, I use both. I use both to change and manipulate my animation. So don't be afraid to use it as well. So I'm going to keep it on object for now. Let's see. I'm going to kick this leg out a little bit. Oh, actually, no. Keep that there. I don't want it to be too symmetrical to this leg. Now what I'm going to do is look at the top-down view. Remember the skateboard lesson that I shared with you. If this character was on a skateboard, I feel like it would be having a difficult time leaning back. But you know what? to combat that, I'm going to go in perspective view and have my character rotate down a little bit. So let me go ahead and select all of these controllers. I'm going to wind that down a little bit like so. I'm going to make a very subtle idle animation for this assignment. You're more than welcome to ham it up and go a little crazy. I'm just keeping it subtle so you all understand how most of these idles work in 3D animation. So, with the exception of video games. Video games usually ham up their idle animations. So, let's go back to the top view. Okay, this feels a little bit more even. Actually, much more so, so I'm going to keep that. Let's go back to the perspective view. And last but not least, I'm going to manipulate these hands a little bit. Like so. Maybe add a little sass like that. Let's see if I can manipulate this cog a little bit. Actually, sorry. If I'm in a contrapposto pose, this hip would be kicked up a little bit. And this would actually be like so. That already feels better. Perfect. A little bit more of a dynamic pose there. Maybe have the head come down a little bit more. We'll have this one come back just a bit more. All right, so I've got that now. Next thing I want to do is these fingers feel a little stiff to me. So let's see. I have a couple options when looking at my hand controllers. I could individually go down and just rotate these every single one. I do not feel like doing that. So generally speaking, there is controllers on the hands, like so, that will allow you to manipulate these controllers on the fingers. So before I manipulate any of these numbers, the first thing I like to do is I like to save my scene just for safe measure. So go ahead and rotate that a little bit more. Sorry, just kind of getting fidgety. Before I get too excited about the fingers, I want to make sure that my character is in a good pose. And that's good enough for me for now. All right, that feels better. Cool. All right, so now that I have that, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save scene as. Let's go and create a brand new folder for this. I'm going to go down here and we're going to call this assignment idle cycle. So I'm going to select this. Now that I have a new rig that should work with Maya ASCII, I'm going to save as an ASCII file. I'm going to create a new folder called work files where I keep all of my work. I'm going to double click there. Now remember, naming conventions, first name, Rudy Solorzano. Name of the assignment, which is idle cycle. And last but not least, the version, which is 001. Save that. Perfect. Save it as a Maya ASCII. Does not give me any problems. Looks good. So now that I have saved my file, I am now going to manipulate these controls. I'm just going to show you really quick what some of these do. So this is the spread. This is going to spread your fingers like so and make them go closer together. The other option is the cup. Cupping will allow you to curl in your fingers. So when you're grasping something, you're actually utilizing that pinky and that finger next to the pinky. Sorry, I've already forgotten what it is. To make sure that it gives you a nice cup. So, rather than go through and do these all individually, I'm going to select all of these. I'm going to press 5. That way I can do all of them at once. But I don't quite like that, so how about 4, maybe 3, 2. 2 feels pretty good to me. And maybe even a 2.5 on the other hand as well. Actually, no, let's make this even more subtle. We'll make that one a 1. Perfect. So, now that we've kind of got this pose, next thing I want to do is I want to key all of my controllers. And again, something that I like to do is I like to put all of my keyable controllers into one single layer. So I'm going to quickly create a new layer. Again, I've already done this in a tutorial, but I'm going to call this controls. The reason I like to do this is because if I were to move my animation to any other workstation, I know that my controls will be saved onto that new workstation for Maya. Otherwise, oftentimes when I create a script for all of my controls, I lose them all when I enter a new workspace. So if I do it this way, I know my controls are going to continue to stay in my Maya files wherever I put them. So to make sure that the controllers are in the folder, just like the Geo, I am clicking the V to hide them. Now that they are hidden, I'm going to go down the line. Really quick. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm going to press cancel. I'm going to add selected objects. Now that I have done that, I can now press the G key and it'll replicate the last action that I have done. And that last action is adding my controllers. So one thing to keep in mind, see how if I click on this and I press G, it immediately gets rid of all the other ones. I don't want to do that. So you want to go down the hierarchy, not from the bottom, not from the top down. So I'm going down the hierarchy, I'm clicking this one, and now I'm able to select all of them. So add selected objects, going up the hierarchy, I can get all of them in the same space. And the same thing is going to apply to the fingers as well. So notice I'm not keying the controllers. I will, however, be keying the hand controllers because I will be animating those. I will not be animating the FK-IK switch here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly see if I were to click on this one, it selects all of them. You know what? This is going to take a lot of time. I wonder if there is a way to hide any of these. Let's see. I haven't done this before, so I just want to see if it does work. Looks like no, that's okay. So in that case, I will have to go down the line and add these individually. So let's go ahead and make it faster by adding selected objects. I'm going to quickly burn through all of these. Really quickly. Add selected controls. Add. And this is much faster than if I were to add them all individually. So I'm going to go ahead and go through here. This one. Now remember, I do want to add this controller, so I'm going to add that one as well. Let me add some of these too. making this easier for myself in the long run. Because again, the reason I'm doing this, it seems like a lot of work now, but it's actually going to save me hours and hours of work because I won't have to continually select all of my controllers. All I have to do is just select them like so, selected objects. So again, going down the line, if I click on this one, actually that's good, the hierarchy is good on that one. So I've got that. Okay, so this one, I need to select this one first, and then this one, otherwise I'll lose them both. Definitely want to select the hip controller. I absolutely want to add the feet, but as you can see, if I select the feet, it selects all the controllers. So I'm going to have to go down the hierarchy. Okay, if I select this one, it selects this one. So let me select that one. G, 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 G. And last but not least, G. So I'm going to do the same thing here. As you can see, get rid of that one, get rid of that one, that one, that one, and last but not least, that one. Perfect. We should have perfect all of our controllers selected. Let's also add the knees just for fun, because I guarantee you those may switch every now and then. Now that we have that, check out the pose of the character. Seems decent to me. Awesome. So now, anytime I want to select all of the controllers that I want to key for my keyframes, instead of having to do literally what I just did and select like every single one, making sure I don't select these. You can do that if you want to. It's going to be incredibly time consuming to do so. It's just easier for me to right click, select objects, key the frame. That's it. So last thing we're going to do is, I don't want this to be too long. So again, just like the assignment, no more than 60 frames. So I'm going to quickly make this 60 so I don't try to overextend my animation into 60, no more than 60 frames. Now I'm going to key the first and the last frame. And the last thing I want to do is make sure, actually even before I do that, before I start keying things, I also want to make sure that settings are correct for this specific animation cycle. And perfect. I want to be an auto span legacy for both default in tangent and out tangent weighted tangents. So now that that's good, I can key all of these with confidence. So I'm going to select all the controllers, select all objects, key that, and in the matter of, well, I don't know, maybe 5 seconds, I'm going to make this character look like they are alive. So I'm just going to quickly do this. And now when I play this, let's turn off the controllers. It's very subtle, but my character is now moving up and down. Now, if I wanted to ham this up even more, which I am going to do because this is far too subtle, if I were to make this even more dramatic, I would select my translate Y, and I would just move that up a lot more. So now when I play this, let's click on Show, Controls. Now it's even more dramatic, which is what you want for your animation. So this is incredibly simple. It already looks like the character is breathing. The main thing that you are going to keep in mind for this assignment is overlapping action. Pretty much the whole gist of this assignment and exercise is to understand and reinforce overlapping action. So really quickly, really simple. If my character is coming up, that means that other things are probably coming down because I am resisting the force that is pushing me up. So if I'm coming up, let me again select my nerve curves. If I'm coming up, my shoulders are probably coming down a little bit. So I'm front view. My shoulders are coming down a little bit. If I'm coming up, these bad boys are going to come down. And already that's giving me some more motion. The other thing that's going to happen is my spine is going to come down as well a little bit. So this I want to make even more subtle. I'm going to show you what it looks like if you exaggerate this. So let's just do a crazy exaggeration. And again, this will work for video game animations, maybe not so much this animation. So let's go ahead and turn off those controls. Let's see what it looks like. Ew. Gross. So, actually, I joke, I jest. What your body will actually be doing as you are breathing. I don't know if you've done this yet in life drawing, but when you are breathing, your spine comes up and it actually comes back a little bit because your chest is expanding. So, again, the importance of reference. If you are filming your own reference, exaggerate the hell out of it so you can see exactly what your body's doing. If you're coming up, your back's actually coming up a little bit to at least inhale all of that air. So I'm going to quickly look at the curves again. On my up pose, which is frame 30, I'm going to make a very subtle up, like so. And as you're breathing in, your arms are coming back ever so slightly. So let me go ahead and dial this back, rotate this back a little bit. So when this is coming up, this should come down ever so slightly. Now that I have those kind of subtle movements, just like the bouncing ball exercise, just like everything else that we've been covering, the main important thing that I also want you to keep in mind is arcs. So you are especially going to be using arcs for this assignment. They're going to be very subtle, very tiny arcs, but here is what I want you to keep in mind. So I'm going to quickly create an editable motion trail. I'm going to set this to 60 frames. I'm going to show frame numbers, create motion trail. So as you can see, my hip only goes up and down, which sucks. That is so dead, not interesting. No matter what angle I look at it, it's just going up and down. I don't want that. So what I want to do is I want to create some arcs in here. And more specifically, you have a couple options. Option number one is you can make a simple loop, and I'll show you what that looks like. So if I were to create a simple loop, this is coming up like so. At frame 15, I'm going to jet this out a little bit. And that is the middle of that. Next, I'm going to go to frame 45, go like so. And now I have a very subtle back and forth loop. Let me go ahead and go to perspective view. Okay, I'm already in perspective view. Let's go ahead and turn off the nerve curves and also the motion trail. Let's call the motion trail hips. And I'm going to hide that with H. And now when I play this, I just added a very simple arc, and already the animation feels significantly better. Now, to push this even further, I've only changed the arc on one side. Let's see what it looks like when I change it on both axes. So let's go ahead and show those controllers again. Okay, so I'm going into the left view. Let's go to the left view. Again, when I look at this, it's just kind of a simple up and down. I have a very subtle arc in there, but it's just not subtle enough. Or, you know what? I want it to be more. I want more out of this. So rather than just have this here, I'm going to jet out my hips a little bit. Remember, come in. It's very, very, very small, so I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to jet that out a little bit like so. I'm going to go to frame 45. I'm going to jet this forward like so. And now when I play this, it's going to be even more dynamic from different angles. So let's go ahead and turn off the nerve curves. Let's turn off the controller for the motion trail. Let's just press H for that. And let's play that out. And already that feels significantly more interesting. So, as you can tell, I don't know if you've already seen this or not, but there's a little pause, and the pause consistently happens at the end point. I will teach you how to avoid that pause when we get close to finishing this assignment. So this is pretty much the gist of what I want you to do for the first half of the assignment. Very simple, very easy to do. To push this even further, I would say let's actually kind of go in and mess around with the arms a little bit. So as we're coming up, again, force is going to be working against us. So this should be coming down a little bit. Let's go ahead and select that controller. Perfect. This should also be coming down a little bit at the top pose. Because remember, if we're coming up, gravity is going to be wanting this to go down. And if you really want to, you can liven this up even more by maybe having... So on the down pose, I kind of want these fingers to come in. So on the up pose, I want them to open up a little bit. So I'm going to select the controller. Remember, I like to save before I start manipulating these controllers on the side. So I'm going to save as. I am going to now call this cycle work files. Perfect. Say this is my ASCII. I'm going to call this version 2. Please, please, please remember to save. If you haven't already, I'm sure you've already rage quitted animation, and it's because sometimes we forget to save, and sometimes Maya just likes to ruin your day. So keep in mind to always save. So I'm going to have these hands open up a little bit. Let's just say 0.5. That seems like way too much, so let's put 1.5. So now when I play this, the fingers are moving ever so slightly. And you know what, even more so, I kind of want to open up this cup a little bit as well. So I'm going to animate the cup being on maybe like a 2. And I want to make sure anything I do to this side, I must also do to this side. So if I'm going to manipulate this, I'm going to have to change the other side. Otherwise, you're going to see it popping, like so. So to make sure that doesn't pop, all you have to do is anytime you manipulate one side, copy, you just paste it to the other side. Even easier, if I were to manipulate... See if I play this again. Okay, perfect. If I were to manipulate just this frame, where I'm like, let's change this. Let's make the cup like 1.5. Yeah, this looks okay. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so now when I'm playing it, you're going to see popping on both sides of the hands. So I'm like, oh crap, that's right, I forgot. All you have to do is select your controllers, copy all your controllers from this side, and paste them over to this side. And now when I play this animation, I'm going to get rid of that popping sensation. There you go. That is a simple idle. This is just part one. The next portion is going to be offsetting. Offsetting is basically where we're going to be manipulating it so it's not so even. You definitely want to make sure that your animation's staggered a little bit, just like we've been talking about in the previous assignments. You don't want things to be landing at the same exact time. You want to stagger them a little bit more. So that's something that we'll be covering a little bit later. But in the meantime, that's it for now. This is the first portion of the assignment. Be sure to upload your results to SingSketch. If you want to burn ahead, you're all more than welcome to take a look at Carol Ashley's video. Again, I'll post a link of that in the description below. Phenomenal professor and mentor. Hands down has taught me a lot of what I know today about animation. So don't be afraid to use Carol Ashley's resources as well. But that's it for this video. Hopefully that's a help, and we will continue this portion next week.